Okay, good afternoon, or hello, because it may be morning where you are. Welcome to this series, or another part of our series of Introduction to Donman. My name is Gary, and I'm a technical support person that you'll talk to if you're having problems with Donman, and we'll try and sort that out. What we've looked at so far is a number of parts of donor management, or Donman, as far as entering donors and donations and things like that. And the next part we're going to look at is then, from all of the stuff that we've entered, is segmenting the data to do mail-outs or reporting, etc. So the area that we're going to look at in this section is the donor appeal section, which is basically the segmentation of the database. So if I go from my Start menu into here, the very first option on that menu that comes up is Create a Donor Selection File. A selection file in Donman is purely a list of donor numbers that I can then do something with the list of numbers in bulk. So I can create merge data file, I can update people's mailing history, I can change codes, I can do all sorts of things with the donor records in bulk, as long as I've got a selection file. So in this case, I'm going to go in, and you can see up the top here, there is a number of tabs that all associate with different parts of the data that we've recorded. So it depends on what you're trying to segment, what questions we answer. And it's like any sort of segmentation you do on a database. The more complex you make it, you might end up with very few records, or whatever it might be. Sometimes you ask too many questions. Not so much too many questions, but your criteria is too complex, and nobody has all of the things that you asked for. So in this case, we're going to look at something just for doing a mailing, which will be fairly straightforward. So what I need to do is put in the name for my mailing. Okay, so give it a nice English name, so when you look at it later, you know exactly what that list was created for. Just like when we do reports, if I've got a report format that I've said, look, the criteria of this list will never change, I can, at the end of this process, save that and use that format again just to run against the data live. For this particular one, I don't have a format, so I can say, no, I haven't got a save format. If I say yes, though, any save format that I had would be here, and I can then just choose that from the list, and it means that all the rules that we'll go through on the screens shortly will be already answered, and I don't need to do that again. I can go straight from here and say I want to finish, which means I don't have to go through any of these questions because they're all predefined. For this particular one, I'm saying I don't have that luxury. I'm going to have to select these people. So if I enter there, I then start going through the tabs. So on the first one, if I'm trying to segment based on dollar amount or number of gifts or whatever it might be, as far as a donation total, then this is where I can segment the data to say, look, I'm looking for people that have given me, $1,000, one or more gifts in this date range. From those figures, I can choose or exclude specific campaigns, which is something that we looked at in one of the earlier sessions. Okay. So for this particular list, I'm going to say I'm not really getting down to that nitty-gritty level of finding my donors. So if I enter, we'll skip that tab. And on the next tab, I can say I'm looking for people with their last donation date between. So this is normally the area where I choose my current donors, my lapsed donors, whatever it might be. Whereas if I was trying to choose, my top donors, then I would use the previous tab because it's the dollar amount that I'd have as a limit to say, well, people who've given me over this will be considered my top donor segment. So it really depends on how you're segmenting your data to do your mail out, but certainly the options are here. So if I were to say 12 till today, so that will then extract everyone whose last gift was between the 1st of the 1st, 2012 and today. If I was trying to find lapsed donors, I might go from the 1st of the 1st, 2010 till the end of 2011. So the actual parameters that you use are totally up to you and how you need to segment your data. From there, I can have people whose first donation date was between certain dates, and this might be where I'm trying to find people that are new acquisitions. Okay. So if I'm doing a general mailing, I'm saying, well, I don't really care, when they were created in this case, because they could have been on my database for 10 years or more, but I just want to know if they've given me a date recently. So as I go through the process, I've got all the questions about their highest amounts, their last amounts. I can choose things that people have given to or exclude them. The only defaults in this process are where I've got people who've got a mail code of no mail, or a no mail until after today, or there's a date of death field on the donor's record. So we can mark the record so that these are the defaults, no matter what else we've got on their donor screen or their main screen, the system can exclude those people from the mailing. So as we go through, lots of questions, we can select people based on their mail codes, their mail lists, and any of these things I say yes to, I'll then get a screen where I can choose the code or codes that I'm looking for. Okay, so if I want more codes, I just keep going until I finished all of them. If perchance what I'm selecting, I want people to have 2 or more of the codes, in this case I've only selected a single code, but if I had multiple codes, then I can say they must have between 2 and whatever of the codes above. So it really depends on what it is we're trying to segment. For a mailing, fairly simple. Normally we've identified what sort of mailing this donor is going to get, so that's the only thing I need to select. So as I go through and get through the screens here, I don't have to go through every single question, because if I said what I'm looking for at this point is everyone who's on the newsletter list whose last donation was since the 1st of 2012 till today, I can now skip these other screens to say they're not relevant for what I'm trying to find. But as you can see on the screen, there are fields for, select by donor type, my categories, my donor, my extra codes, my region codes, all those different things that we've identified on the actual person's record or the company's record. These are things that I can use and use in conjunction when I'm doing my selection file. Okay, so I can get down to postcodes, particular states. I can select by particular country codes, select donors based on their donor numbers. The age from, of course, will only work if I've got date of birth, acquisition dates. I've got flag fields, which are more global, include or exclude groups of people. Okay, or I can go straight to selection finalize. So there is lots of questions here, but without all of the questions, you don't have flexibility to do the segmentation that we're trying to do most of the time. So in this case, I'm going to keep this one very simple and just go through. By default, Donman saves or outputs the selection file into postcode order, because normally I'm doing this for a mailing, but if I wanted to do alpha, I can just choose alpha order. So for this one, I'll say no, I'm going to keep it on postcode order. Yes to begin. The system will then show me how many donors I've got in total, very quickly, sorry, and how many records got selected. All of the questions that I've said yes and no to will come up on this screen. So it's a print preview of all my selection criteria. So if I got to the end and said, oh, hang on, I haven't got enough records or I've got too many, I can certainly have a look at my criteria, and from that I might then be able to say, okay, look, I've said this, include this group of people or exclude these group of people that really I didn't want, and that's going to skew my numbers. Okay, but all of the criteria that we've put in, where I put my dates, etc., we can see there. The system will store that away so that if I did need to know how a particular selection was run previously, all the questions are there, and I can certainly open the file and redress that later. Once I've done that, I've now got a list of people, and most of the things that are on this particular screen will use that selection to do different things. I can do a short summary of the donor info, which is basically a list of the donors, and will show me their last donation and things like that. The primary use for this is normally to do a mailing. So from there I would go down and say, I now want to create a mail merge data file. Okay. So all the previous updates or selections that I've done are here. And if we look down, we can see our August 2014 newsletter. So you can see why giving it a nice English name is a very good idea. The system by default will count how many records are in that file. So when I'm doing it, if the number comes up and I know that it's totally the wrong number, I know that it's a good chance I've selected the wrong file up the top here. Okay. Apart from that, I can go through and say, what is it that I'm trying to extract? I have got an option to extract an amount for each person based on their total in a period of time. I can use second addresses. I can use formatted names and addresses, which is when we looked in the previous part of the receipts, it's just an address block. So for this one, I'm going to leave all the default values. The system will create a selection, text output file name of a pl.txt, and this is primarily that if I was doing a a mailing where I'm using labels, etc. like that, then I can have a label document set up that's all automatically using this as the data source, and I'm just overriding it with the current list of people. For things other than that, I would normally just copy the name of the selection file and make that the same as my text file. So the file that comes out of Donman is a purely tab delimited text file that I can use with Word or Excel to do my merging. If I've got a document set up to automatically use this file, then down the bottom, like we did when we looked at the receipting previously, I could say yes, load word and merge, and I can select my document. For this one, I'm going to say no, I want to put this data into Excel. So if I say no there, all of the fields that come out on this next screen here, above the dotted line, will come out no matter what, because they're my core fields for mailing. But everything under that, just like when we looked at the receipting in an earlier session, I can choose donors and choose any field that I want to include from the donor record, and that will be added to this list and will stay there until I physically remove it. So if I wanted their phone numbers or mobile numbers, etc., to always come out, then I can add those to the list and they will always come out. For most things, once I get this to a point where I say, look, they're the fields that I use 99% of the time, I don't have to worry about stopping on this screen. I can just click on continue, and the system will go through and now create the mail merge data file, which has got the names and addresses in. So from there, I could use, as I said previously, I can use that to do a Word mail merge. I can use it to open the file in Excel. I can use the selection file to then update the donor's mail summary history. So when I do a mail out for a campaign, I can then say, for this list of people, I'm mailing them for this campaign, and update all the contact details. So when I look at the person's record, I'll know that they did receive a particular mailing. Okay, so in a nutshell, that's pretty much just the selection process. And yes, there's lots of questions, but without lots of questions, sadly, we don't have the flexibility to get into the data and extract the data the way we want to. So that will sort of conclude the donor appeals section. Thanks for joining us today. And the next part we'll look at is some of the basic reporting in Donman. Okay, thanks for your time.